My name's Renee, and I'm the Education Coordinator for Bright Lights. I'll be serving as one of your hosts, and my friends Kristen and Miss Lori will also be helping with hosting duties. I want to cover a few housekeeping items before we get started, and then I will turn this over to Nichole so the fun can begin. Because we are in a webinar format, remember that we can't see your picture or hear you, but don't worry, that's how it's supposed to be. However, if you want to ask questions, you'll just want to use the chat feature at the bottom of your screen. And you just type in your question or your comment in the box, and we will see it. I also want to let you know that we will be recording this session, and we'll have a link on our YouTube channel to this camp in about a week so that you can watch it again, or you can share it with new people. And with that, I am going to turn this over to Miss Nichole so that we can get some info on how best to do graphic novels and all of the cool stuff that we are going to be doing. All right, over to you, Nichole.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Wham, Bam, Kapow. Let's make a graphic novel. So I hope everybody can hear me okay. And like Miss Renee said, we are going to be utilizing the chat feature a lot during this club to kind of connect a little bit differently since I can't see you or hear you. And we're also going to be learning
Well, it appears we are having a little video issue here right now. Just bear with us while we figure this out, everyone.
Miss Renee, this is Miss Lori, and
Hi.
I can hear you now. And if some folks can tell us on the chat if they can hear us now, that would be great. Hi, Jessica. Hi, Blake. Hi, Connor and Nick and Bowden. And thank you. It looks like everyone can hear us. Awesome.
Wonderful. So I don't know if Miss Nichole, if she got kicked off of the feed.
Perhaps. Well, let's give her a second to jump back on. I'm going to say hello to a few more of our friends. Hello, Lucia, and hi, Anna. Allison's on. Thanks for letting us know. Hello, Elliot and Alex and Kristen and Bryn. Let's see, who else is on? Connor. We've got lots of friends on.
We do. I tell you what I am going to do is share my screen so we can look at the supplies that we want to have up and ready when it's time to go. So we've got paper and pencil. That's not too difficult, right? And colored pencils or crayons and markers and lots of books to read. I think that is, if you don't have your supplies put together quite yet, you've got some time as we wait for Miss Nichole to join us again.
Yep.
But yeah,
and I just got my supplies together, Renee. I have some just white paper, and then I grabbed a couple charcoal pencils as well as a regular pencil and some colored pencils. And then I grabbed a few books, for a little inspiration. I've got some, I don't know what picture dictionary, but some of my favorite kiddo books are Chicka Chicka Boom Boom. I just like to say that. I also have a little Go Dog Go for inspiration, and I just haven't seen her in a while, so I pulled out a little Goldilicious because sometimes on Mondays I like to look at unicorns. So
right, I think that is an excellent thing. So I'm talking to Miss Nichole on my phone at the same time because technology is awesome. And she was kicked out and needs to get back in.
Okay.
So I have to
No
figure out
worries.
how that's all gonna work. So if you and Miss
Well,
Kristen want to chat
yeah,
back and forth, I'm gonna
you
mute
bet.
myself and see what I can do.
I'm going to ask a couple questions and ask some of our students to jump in the chat, if that's okay. If you have a favorite graphic novel that you have been enjoying maybe over the last couple months, if you want to type in the name of that, we'd love to share those as inspiration. Oh, we've got one. We've got Wings of Fire and Dog Man from Lena, Big Nate from Blake. What is a graphic novel? There's a great question. We'll talk about that in a moment. Smile, Anne of Green Gables. There is Nichole.
Okay, guys, sorry about that. My computer decided it didn't want to use Zoom. So I am back on my phone. Does that work?
Yay.
Can you hear me okay, Lori? So
I can hear you great. And yeah, you look great. I was just asking some of our friends what some of their favorite graphic novels are. And I'm just going to share a couple of them while we get started here. My favorite is The Cardboard Kingdom, Smile, Sisters. There's some great ones that everyone, but then one kiddo asked me about what is a graphic novel. So I'm handing it back to you, Nichole.
You know, that is such a great question because we are going to talk about that a little bit. And so we are going to skip ahead to different types of books with pictures because you guys have probably read a ton of different kinds of books with pictures. Here's one of my favorites. It's called Unicorn. And there's a little goat on there too. I don't know if you can see it. It says Unicorn thinks he's pretty great. And it's really silly. But my favorite part of this, it's a picture book. So one thing about picture books that makes them different than graphic novels is that they combine what we call a narrative, which is a story, with words, what we write. And so obviously we've got picture books, and I'm hoping you can see me okay because I can't see myself. And so picture books. We also have another one of my favorites. This one is Captain Underpants. Lori, can you still see me okay?
I can. You look great. And I'm a personal fan of Captain Underpants.
Captain Underpants is pretty fabulous. And as you will know, Captain Underpants has a ton of illustrations. But guess what? Captain Underpants is still not a graphic novel because technically it has more words, more narrative than it does pictures. So still not a graphic novel, an awesome illustrated chapter book. Let's see if I can find another one that maybe you guys have read. Ghost Patrol. Anybody Ghost Patrol fans? It's a big hit at our house right now. Lots of pictures, still not a graphic novel. Because as you can see, the narrative, I'll see if I can get it close for you guys. There's dialogue, but there are also words to describe what's happening in the story. It's still mostly told with words. But, and I'm sure you guys have all read this one, Dog Man. Dog Man, a graphic novel. Why, you ask? Check out the layout. The layout is going to be the biggest part that tells you whether something's a graphic novel, an illustrated picture book, or a straight picture book, like the Unicorn. And most of it has to do with the words. It has to do with the text. So what they say are graphic novels happen in sequences. So you can see there's lots of little boxes. So what does that kind of remind you of? I think, and I don't know that a whole lot of people read the Sunday morning paper anymore, but when I was a kid, they always were full of comic strips, like Garfield. So Garfield are comic strips, which means that the story, the entire story, takes place in 3 to 6 to 9 frames. So on one page, you're telling an entire story. In a graphic novel like Dog Man, one page is just part of the story. So it's very different than a comic strip. And again, very different. Sorry, guys. We're just going to have all the technical difficulties on day one, so we can get them out of the way. Okay.
So, Nichole, we had a friend ask if a graphic novel and a comic book are the same.
Okay, that is an excellent question because that is another kind of option. A comic book is actually a type of graphic novel. So not all graphic novels are comic books, but all comic books are technically graphic novels. So the difference is a comic book might not tell an entire story in one issue. So they kind of are released in sections, almost like chapters. So there might be 5, 10, 20, 30 different comic books to tell one full story. Does that make sense? That's kind of the difference between a comic and a graphic novel. A graphic novel tells the whole story. But
that
those are
makes
kind
sense. Thank you, Nichole. That makes sense.
Those are different types of illustrated books. So lots of different books have illustrations. Oh, there's one more type that I forgot. And my camera's going to be really wonky, guys. I am so sorry. See if I can get it to sit.
There you go.
I don't know. There we go. Okay, let's do that. There's another type of book that you guys see in the library all the time that have different types of illustrations. And these are nonfiction books. But one of my favorite things about nonfiction books is sometimes they're styled a little bit, their layout, how they put the pictures and the words, look a little bit like graphic novels, which I think is kind of cool.
Oh.
But all of the in a nonfiction book is true. So they're very different than graphic novels that are fiction, that cover an entire story arc, but they still use illustrations to tell their story. So I think that's very cool. You'll also notice, so we talked about the format in a lot of different graphic novels, and we talked about the little squares on them that you see. Well, a lot of other illustrated books use that same technique in their storytelling. So like the unicorn book, for example, uses different sets of illustrations to tell the story. So that's something you'll see as you start to kind of look at books, and as we talk more and more about graphic novels, that might be something that you notice when you're looking at different types of books, whether they're graphic novels or not. You'll notice those little squares, that and how they set up and how they do the layout. And we're going to talk a lot more about layout tomorrow in Graphic Novel Club, so be ready for that. Let's see, where should we go now? Oh, okay, so you guys can probably see this too, but I have it in front of me as a cheat sheet. One of the biggest questions that I am asked as an author, which I guess I never really got a chance to introduce myself.
Yeah, you should tell us what you've done and why you're such an expert at this, Nichole.
Thank you guys for hanging in there with me. So I am Nichole Hansen. I am from Lincoln, just like you guys, and I am a picture book author. So I mostly do picture books. Like Zany Can Do Anything. And probably my favorite book that I've written is Sharky Dreams of Pizza, because sharks and pizza are my favorite. I do not actually write graphic novels, but what I do as my other side gig is I am actually a children's book publisher. So I work for Handersen Publishing. I'm their CEO, which means I'm kind of the big boss, but I also do a lot of the formatting, and I work with 30 authors and illustrators from all around the globe. So from here in Nebraska, we have authors in Florida and New Mexico, New York. We also have authors in England and Ireland. I've worked with illustrators from Australia and Germany. So we do a lot, and I build a lot of different books, from picture books to illustrated chapter books like we talked about, and some middle grade fiction that doesn't have any illustrations, but those probably aren't my favorite because I really like the pictures. Probably the reason that I really like the pictures in books, though, is because I am not a great artist. But that doesn't mean that I can't create awesome books, which I think is pretty cool and why I love my job. So when I go to schools and I talk with kids, one of the biggest questions that they ask me is, where do you get the ideas for your books? So where do you find inspiration? And my question and my answer to them is, you can find inspiration everywhere, like literally everywhere. Sharky Dreams of Pizza was inspired because I'm the only person in my family, there are 4 of us, and I'm the only one who likes pizza, which is...
What?
I know, it's weird and crazy, but I wanted to write a book about pizza because pizza deserves a book. And my daughter had this crazy idea of a story in her head, and she called it Sharky Dreams of Pizza, but it was actually about a boy named Sharky who was friends with a giant pizza. So it was totally different story. I really liked the name Sharky, and it gave me the idea of a shark who lives in the ocean. But if you live in the ocean, how are you going to find pizza or even know what pizza is? So if you check this one out from the library or find it, you will discover how a shark in the ocean loves pizza. It's pretty crazy.
Ms. Nichole, with a question from Braden, how many books have you made?
How many books have I made? So I have written 8 books,
Okay.
but our publishing house, Handersen Publishing, will actually publish its 50th book this year. So
Wow.
So for all of our books for the publishing house, even though I don't write the words and I don't do the illustrations for them, I put them all together and I design covers for them. So I have built 50 books and written about 8. So,
and Zany is one of your characters on your book, and he's on your shirt, I see there.
He is on my shirt too. So Zany is another book that I wrote, that the inspiration for the story came from somebody I met. And this guy was a kid, just like you guys. He was a student, and he loved to read. And guess what? He loved unicorn books. They were his favorite. He thought unicorns were so cool and magical, and they had horns, and everything about them was awesome. But he was so mad because all of the unicorns in the books that he was reading about were pink and frilly and girly, and he was frustrated. And so I wanted to write a book about a unicorn that could do anything. This unicorn, I'll show you a few of the spreads from Zany. So there's some Zany. Zany likes to make lists of all the things that he wants to do. So he loves to eat and cook, and he loves to dream, but he loves to dance and play rock and roll. And I'll show you a few more of the inspirations from Zany tomorrow when we talk about storyboarding and creating the layout of our books. Because when you see the original Zany, you're going to be like, what? How did you ever turn that? I'll give you a sneak peek. This is the original Zany the Unicorn. That's it. That's all it looks like. And somehow, magically, doing the things that we talk about a little bit, it turned into a picture book like this. So we're going to get there. Does anybody else have any questions before we move on?
Let's see. I think we're okay on questions for now, Nichole. People are excited to hear what we're going to do next.
Excellent. That is so cool. So we're talking inspiration. And if you guys have a place or a thing or something that you do that brings you inspiration, feel free to throw it in the chat and we'll share it with everybody. And because the cool thing about inspiration is, like I said, it can come from anywhere. And sometimes if you have an idea, you're like, you know what I really like to do when I need a good idea? I like to go outside and play. Or I like to go to the beach and swim, and I get lots and lots of ideas. Sometimes that's helpful that you hear friends where they get their ideas too. So here's some other ones, cool ones. Another place, books and movies for ideas. We're gonna use a book during our sessions a little bit, and it is called Cinderella's Other Shoe. Now this was actually written by Philippa Ray, who is from England, but the illustrator was Tevin Hansen, who's actually my husband, and he's the co-owner of our business, and he's also an author. But Philippa got the idea for this book. Let's see, how many of you have heard the story of Cinderella? Guessing pretty much
Yep.
everybody knows the story of Cinderella. But the inspiration for this came from the idea that Cinderella's shoes were characters in the book. And so the whole story is actually told from the perspective of her shoes. So it's pretty cool. And we'll see some more examples of this as we move forward too. So we are
Okay,
going to
Nichole, while you're doing that, I'll just share a couple things here. We've got folks that said, I'm going to do a book about Burp Man. That sounds fun.
That sounds hilarious.
It sounds like we've got some folks that are inspired by their dogs and their bigger brothers. Yeah, so lots of good ideas, cool ideas here.
Ideas for inspiration, guys. That's the cool thing about being creative and having all of these wild and crazy ideas. You can do anything from a comic book about somebody that really likes to burp to the story that is familiar to everybody like Cinderella, but you put a twist on it. So I think that's so cool. So we're going to start.
We've got
even more. There's Burt Man. I just saw Burt Man.
Yep.
So we're going to move on a little bit to the people or things, or man, you could have a story about literally anything. You could write, there's a story called, I can't think of what it's called, but it's about a pencil, or The Day the Crayons, the crayon book. So you can write a story. Your character does not have to be a human. It does not have to be an animal. It could be anything. But we're going to talk about developing those characters and making them interesting in the stories that you have. So we're going to start with what makes a good character. So I'm going to give you 10 seconds to think in your head. So close your eyes and think really, really, really hard about all the characters and all the books and all the movies and TV shows that you've ever seen, and picture one in your head who's maybe your very favorite one, and think about them and think about all the things that you would use to describe them. So let's see, are they silly? Are they serious? What do they look like? What are they wearing? Do they change? Maybe your character has a secret identity. Do they have superpowers? Is it a superhero character? Do they have a weakness, a strength? Keep picturing this character in your head and think, how many different ways can I use to describe this character? And you really want to visualize them, because when you're creating a character, you're explaining this to a reader who's never met your character before. So the best way to be able to describe your character to a reader or introduce them through a story is to know them really, really well. So I put on this sheet to think of your characters like people you know. So can you describe your mom really, really well? Do you know what her favorite food is? What does she usually wear? Do you know what makes her really, really mad? Yeah, I know what makes my mom really, really mad. And when I was a kid, I was usually pretty good at doing that. So you can think of that. Think of your dog. You know what your dog likes to do, his favorite games to play, his favorite things to do with you, his favorite food to sneak. You want to know your character, they say, inside and out. And all of those things might not end up in your story, but knowing your character better will help you to tell your character's story better, which is kind of important. So the next thing, we're going to utilize that chat again, and we'll have Miss Lori ready. We're going to think of interviewing our character. Have you ever seen somebody be interviewed on the news when there's a reporter and they're there? Here, I'll use my handy dandy microphone, and you're there, and you're like, they're asking this person questions about an event or something that happened. So we're going to throw out some questions on the chat to interview our character. What are some questions that you could ask to get to know your character better? And as they come up, Larry, we're going to have them go out.
Yep.
So guys, you have a piece of paper. Now is a great time to write down some of these questions, because as you're developing your characters for the graphic novel that you want to create, these might be questions that you want to ask your character. So
we're getting some questions.
Okay, let's see. Do we have some good ones? I'm sure
we said what things that you like. Yep. Where were you born?
Where were you born?
One of
That's good.
Yeah. Well, especially if it isn't exactly a person, it would be exciting to hear that. Oh, what do you dream about from Kenna?
Kenna, that is a fabulous way to get to know your characters better. Let's see.
How old is your character from Maddox? Can you tell me about your... Yep, and can you tell me about your family from Lena? Oh, here's another good one from Nora. What is your biggest fear?
Oh, that's a good way to get to know a person, get to know a character, what's scary to them, especially if maybe you were writing a book about a superhero. A fear could be like a weakness, and the villain might take advantage of that.
Mm-hmm. What do you like to eat? What is your character's favorite color? Oh, I like this one. What do you love from Franny?
Oh, what do you love? See, those are different ways to get to know your character, because if you know your character inside and out, their story is going to make more sense to you. And then it's going to make more sense to the readers, the people that are actually going through your book and reading it to enjoy it.
Laura Lynn has a really good question too. What are your secrets and will you tell me?
Ooh, what are your secrets and will you tell me? You guys, here's something silly and kind of funny about interviewing your character is that you get to be both parts. You get to be the reporter asking the questions, but then you also get to become your character a little bit. It's like being in a play or on the stage or in a movie. You get to answer these questions just like your character would. So, okay, so we've asked some of these questions. Now, think in your head as you've got your character. Maybe it's an original character. Maybe it's a character that you've already seen or read about. And how would they answer some of these questions? What would they say to what is your favorite color? My daughter has a character that she wrote for a book that she's kind of been making, and their favorite color is orange. And I think that's because her favorite color is orange. So you can kind of use some characteristics from yourself. It's almost like interviewing you too. So this is a game though that you guys can play on your own. So it says interview your character, and you can come up with 5 questions. If you're with a friend or maybe a sibling, brother, or sister, you can even use your mom and dad, and you can ask them these questions, or you can make them be the reporter and ask you these questions and pretend to be your character. So if you're a super villain character, you can, put your villain face on, and you can play the part. You can be like, when they ask what's your weakness and you're a super villain, what would you say? You would be like, I don't have any weaknesses, because that's what a villain would say. They wouldn't tell you their weaknesses. So does anybody have any questions about characters in your books?
I did see one other question while those are coming up, Nichole. Franny also said, what is your wish?
What is your wish? You could do an entire story around one wish. That would be very cool. Do you know what, guys? What is the coolest part about getting to kind of visit with you in this way? I am getting lots of inspiration. So I have a feeling I will be having a new book coming out very soon. Ooh, I like that.
Another question.
More organized.
Yep, there's a question. Can I make my character a demon? Ooh. And that's a question that Rakan had, it looks like.
So could you make your character a demon? Well, the cool thing is you can make your character whatever you want your character to be. You are the author. So, but in making your character a demon or a good person or a bad person or whatever you want to be, we're going to talk a little bit later about conflict and action. So if your character is a demon, what is their conflict? They could still be, are they all bad? Are they a little bit good? They could still have a favorite color. They could even have a silly favorite food that they like to eat, that maybe demons don't normally really like chocolate, but the demon in your book does. So you can still do things that are kind of surprising and fun as you're developing these characters.
I guess I have a question real quick, Nichole. Is it important is it important for your main character to be likable?
Ooh, not always. Think about some books. Think about some books that you've read where the main character, and I've got one that's right beside me that is this makes me smile. So I don't know if you've read this. It's another one of those illustrated chapter books called Franny K. Stein. And it's a play on Frankenstein. He's a mad scientist. And the cool thing about Franny K. Stein is she's not the nicest of main characters. She's kind of mean sometimes. She's kind of confused. She really likes things very dark. And so she might not be the most likable of main characters, but you kind of root for her throughout the book because she's pretty silly. But yeah, your character the main character of your book doesn't always have to be super likable. That's a very good question.
I like that.
Yeah.
Can you make your main character? Yeah, there's just one more question. Can you make your main character be your dad?
Can your main character be your dad? I think your dad would feel very honored if he got to be the main character in your book. I think he'd think that was pretty cool, that you cared about him so much to make him the main character in your book. I will say this, if you're going to use a real person in your book, you have to ask permission. You just have to ask. You have to say, hey, I'm writing a book and I would like to use you as a character in my book. And here's the tough stuff, because if they say, no, I really don't want you to do that, you kind of have to say okay and move on with your day. You could change them up a little bit. So maybe they were inspired by your dad, but it's not the exact person of your dad in your book. Does that make sense? Kind of.
It gets to me, Nichole.
But you know what? You're writing a book and it's not going to be professionally published. You're pretty safe to use whatever you want to do.
There's one more question real quick, and I'm just going to, and then we'll go on. Can God be a character?
Can God be a character? God can be a character in your book. You can definitely utilize God as a character in your book. Realize that when you use something like God, or something that a lot of people are familiar with in different ways, some readers, they're going to interpret that. They're going to see it, read it. They're going to picture it in their mind a little bit differently. But that's kind of the cool thing about books is, as an author, you write something with a very specific picture in your head, and you see it this one way. But when somebody else reads it, the pictures in their brain are going to look a little different, and that's okay. That's the cool thing about sharing art or writing with the world, is everybody's interpretation. And sometimes people might have a positive, sometimes they might be a little negative, but you build a thick skin pretty quickly because they're just their opinions, and you know what you saw when you made the book. Do you have any more questions?
I think we're kind of getting to the end of that.
Okay, so characters. We're kind of blasting through a lot of information really quickly, so thanks for hanging with me, guys. We're going to move on to, we have these characters, and they're amazing. We know what they like. We know what they don't like. We know what they wear. We know so much about them, but where are they? That's another really important part of your story. It's the setting. So where are you? Where's your character? The cool thing about setting, and I always tell people that when you're describing the setting, you want to use your senses. So let's think of senses, your sense of sight, hearing, touch, smells. Tastes can come into play a little bit in different ways, maybe if you're at a restaurant or different places. So when you're looking around the setting, you want the person reading your book to really feel like they are there. So we're going to use our senses, and we're going to think about where we are. So we're going to close our eyes just like we did to picture a character. We're going to picture a place this time. So get your place in your head. It could be any place. And then again, we're going to ask some questions. It's almost like we're interviewing our place, which is kind of silly, but are you outside? Are you inside? Is it hot, cold, windy? What's the weather like? Do you hear anything? What do you see? Think about all of those things as you're picturing your setting in your mind. So we're going to play a quick game with the chat again. And we're going to pick a setting. I'm going to pick. Oh, pardon?
Ms. Nichole, I have 2 quick questions before we do that. Is that all right?
Definitely. What do we got?
Is there a limitation of how many panels per page?
Okay. There's not.
And then the other question was, can I use Pokemon as a character?
Okay. So this is kind of back to where when we were talking about putting your dad in a book. So we talk about copyright a lot. Pokemon is an existing character. It's an existing book, movie. Pokemon is definitely, they say, under copyright, which means a business somewhere owns Pokemon. But the cool thing about being a kid or an adult, if you are not going to sell your book, so you just want to make it to enjoy it, you might let other people read it, and that's fine. They call that fan art or fan fiction. So you can use Pokemon in your graphic novels and in your own original way to create art or a story, as long as it's fan art or fan fiction that you are not selling. So you can't make any money off of it, or you could get in legal trouble. And as long as you're not broadcasting it, it mostly comes down to, are you trying to make money off of it? So as long as you're just doing it for fun and to share with your friends and your family, or maybe other people that really like Pokemon, as long as you're just doing it for that reason, like I said, fan art and fan fiction, you are okay to use Pokemon for your own original graphic novel or story. That's actually a really good question, and that's kind of a complicated question a little bit too. But it is one that I have to think about a lot for my job, because we are a business. And so we do sell things. So we have to be really careful with things that are copyrighted. And all of our books are actually copyrighted too. So so we have a book called Romby the Skater Zombie, which is another illustrated chapter book. This one's written and illustrated by Tevin Hansen. So if somebody read this book and they really, really liked the characters of Romby and his best friend, so they liked it and they wanted to make a book. They wanted to write their own story about Romby and his best friend and another adventure that they would go on. As long as they're not writing it to sell it, you can do that. And honestly, as a publisher, we think it is so cool when people that read our books are inspired to create even more artwork from them.
Here's a follow-up question to that. What if you write a book that is like another one, but you don't know that it exists?
That's a very good question. And this is when it gets a little tricky sometimes, because a lot of times 2 ideas can exist at the same time, and one person doesn't necessarily know that this other person wrote a book. And it kind of comes to, as long as they were created completely separately, generally there isn't any legal recourse, which is a technical term to mean you can't make them stop writing the book or take it off of the market. But lawyers could be involved, especially when it's really big things. Sometimes one author will buy the rights from the other person that wrote it, and then that person will just take their book off of the market.
If someone, for example, wanted to use like a sports team name, is that okay?
Generally, that is not okay, because the actual sports teams' names are licensed and copyrighted. So that's why a lot of times when you see books and you see movies, they use made-up sports teams because of that. Now, if you see a movie where they use an actual sports team in the movie, they got permission and probably paid that sports team to use the name in their book or movie.
Okay, great. We'll keep them moving then.
I know, copyright, guys. You know, copyright gets really, 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 really complicated. So you might be thinking Cinderella's other shoe on this question, and I don't want to like hang out on this for too long. But Cinderella, the story of Cinderella has existed for so long And there are so many different versions of Cinderella that you can use that story. So a lot of the fairy tales, that's why you see so many fairy tale retellings, because they aren't under copyright. They're not licensed. So you can switch up those stories and use them however you want to.
Great.
Yeah, I like that. Can you use Jurassic Park? Jurassic Park is right in there with those other copyrighted materials, guys. Any movie name, again, you can create fan art or fan fiction if you're not planning to sell it. So pretty much anything that's out there. And with you guys being students, the fan art and the fan fiction, most authors and illustrators, they feel really lucky that you're inspired by their work enough to create new art or new words, and they actually think it's pretty cool. So we good? Yeah. Okay, so we are going to play this setting game really quick, so get your chats ready because we're going to go.
Okay.
I'm going to give you a setting, and we are going to think of as many words or things that we can use to describe this setting using one letter. Okay, I'll try to pick one that is not too tricky. And we'll go, and I will try to read them out as they come out too, Lori, because we'll go. Okay, so
Great.
we're gonna go to the beach. So everybody start to picture the beach and all the things that could be on the beach, and we're gonna keep it appropriate, friends. And we are going to make things that start with the letter S. Can you think of anything on the beach that starts with the letter S? We've got sand, swimsuits, sunglasses. Wow, you guys are good. Seashells, sea, sand, sun. Ooh, surfboard. I like it. Surfers, seaweed, sun, sunscreen, sandals, sunblock. Good job. Oh, wow. There was a lot. Sandcastles. Saris. I like that. Sharks. Awesome. Sharky would be proud. Signs. There are lots of signs on the beach. And we're going to come up with some more in 5, 4, swimmers, sisters, 3. Think of the weird ones. Starfish. 2, 1. Stop. Sandwiches. I saw sandwiches last. That was awesome, guys. So it's kind of hard to think of things that start with one letter, and we are almost out of time. So this is a game, and you can see there's some extra material too, guys, so you can see what these games are when you go to the Bright Lights website. I think, is that on there, Lori?
Yep.
Yeah. So you can download some of these games. The coolest thing, I really like that one, and we have a ton of fun with that one when we do it live in different club and sessions, is you pass it back and forth. So if I was there with a friend, or like Lori and I were playing together, we would pick our place and pick our letter, and we'd go back and forth until one of us repeated something or one of us couldn't think of anything, and that person is the winner. You can even do this in a big circle group of friends, and you just pass it around and around and around, and it's almost like musical chairs, but it gets your brain thinking so hard and so fast about different ways to describe a setting and different ways to do things. So this game, you can also do this game with your characters too, in different ways that would describe, like you could say clown, and you could go back and forth with a friend to come up with as many ways as you could describe a clown with the letter R. So it's kind of a game that you can change around and do a lot of things. We're gonna do one more thing really quick, guys, and this will be our last thing for today. And we're gonna talk a little bit about action, because graphic novels use action a lot. They use action in 2 different ways. We talked a little bit about conflict in the story. So action can be the problems and the things that happen to your character throughout the story. But graphic novels also use action within the illustrations, which is probably my favorite part of graphic novels. They actually use movement in the illustration to convey movement in the story. So you will see, there we go. Okay, I've got 2 examples, and they're probably on your screen now. This one is from Cinderella's Other Shoe. And this one is one of my favorite ways. This is actually an illustrated chapter book, so it's a little bit different, but kind of similar. So the author and the illustrator used movement both in the text. You see how the text kind of moves like it's dancing? And within the illustrations, there's 2 pictures that show how the shoe is moving. So you can almost actually see the movement within the illustration. This one's just funny because you can always kind of guess what's going to happen next. this is the very end of this version of Cinderella. And you can see the movement of them. So you actually, it's almost like they're riding their skateboards. You can picture it in your head. You could see them flying down the sidewalk on their way. This one is another great way that graphic novels have the ability to use action. So this is an example from Romby the Skater Zombie. And the author illustrator actually uses it. It's almost like a stop motion animation. It goes really slow, and you can kind of see how he
kind of plans it out that way.
They call it sequential. So it's a sequential picture. You can kind of almost picture it happening. And another good example of this is in Captain Underpants. You guys remember Flip-O-Rama, where you kind of flip the pages back and forth? That's another good job of using action in your books and text. So there's another fun, crafty kind of thing that you can do within this. There it is. So you can actually create your own action sequences. And this is really easy. If you've got your paper in front of you, just draw 6 squares. This is a super duper simple one. So this one I did, and you can kind of just, if you go around, you can see the flower petals being added to the flower until you get a full one. Sometimes with these, if you do it right, you can actually cut the squares out, and if you put it together, you can make a little flip book out of them, and you could actually see the action in there. So, but adding action is really important because that's what's going to keep your reader engaged. The conflict or the action, you know, they're getting to know your character, they're getting to know where they're at, but they want to know what happens to your character. And that is really cool. And graphic novels give you the ability to actually create movement on the page. It's almost like a live movie that your reader is like reading with them. So it helps that process in their brains. So does anybody have any questions? That was a lot of information.
Well, I just wanted to share that Blake says that you have made him interested in writing a graphic novel series.
That is so cool, Blake. You know, most graphic novels do tend to be series, and I think that's because they're kind of inspired from that group of graphic novels of comic books that are series like that too.
Let's see. I think that's about it.
That it
Would
for today,
Flip-O-Rama, someone asked if Flip-O-Rama would be a copyright.
Technically, Flip-O-Rama would be a copyright. Dave Pilkey kind of grabbed Flip-O-Rama. So Tevin, so this is talking about copyright, doing your own spin on something. So when Tevin created the original Romby, this is kind of the actual book form. But when he was coming up with the ideas and thinking about what he wanted to do, he created something called Speedo Vision, which he put it just like Flip-O-Rama and just like these kind of action sequences that we're making, only you had to look at it really, really fast. So it would be Speedo Vision. So he took Flip-O-Rama and made his own version of Flip-O-Rama and gave it a new name. And that is not copyright. That is his own original idea. So you just have to think about, how can I make Flip-O-Rama my own idea? And it might just be giving it a different name.
Cool.
Yeah, that is really cool. That's the cool thing about this, guys, is graphic novels, you can be so creative, and there are so many different ideas and ways to go. You just kind of have to start. And when you tune in tomorrow, if you tune in again, which I hope you will, and hopefully we won't have those technical problems at the beginning, but when you tune in tomorrow, we're going to talk about creating a story arc and creating a storyboard so that your story makes sense, because that's kind of hard. Sometimes it's really easy to just jump in there and you think, I've got this idea and this character and I want them to be here, but it has to make sense, and you have to have a plan. That's kind of an important part about creating a graphic novel, because you're telling an entire story. So we're going to talk a little bit tomorrow about planning it out.
Awesome.
Yeah.
It seems like our friends will have some about this afternoon too.
Perfect. Yes, I hope so. And then you guys can tell me some of your ideas that you came with tomorrow.
Fantastic. I learned so much just listening. I'm very inspired to to make my own graphic novel, I think. So we just want to say thank you to everybody for being here with us again today. We will be back tomorrow, same time at 10 o'clock, so that we can continue to learn more with Miss Nichole about graphic novels and all the cool stuff that we can do. Please make sure that you tell your friends if they want to join in, they can do that. Just go to our website at brightlights.org to get the registration link, and then remind your parents that if they get a survey emailed to them about this, to go ahead and fill that out and let us know what other types of camps you would like to have in the future. And with that, we will sign off. We'll see you guys again tomorrow. Thanks for being here.